Good morning and good afternoon, everyone on this call, and welcome to our session on data governance and Azure Purview, part of our Azure DataFest. And if we move to the next slide, we'll recap a little bit of the calendar of the previous sessions and the upcoming ones. We started this journey at the beginning of October, and we spent some time together to understand how to ingest the data and big data volumes into Azure, and what are some of the services, and especially the fully managed services available in Azure to process all this data at scale, and also depending on the type of formats and queries and use cases that you have for data processing. So we touched a bit upon data lakes, data warehouses and analytics, Azure Data Explorer for log analytics and real-time analytics. And then last 28th of October, we discussed, for those of you that were with us, how we can plug in, or you can plug in machine learning with lowering the barriers, the entry barriers to perform machine learning on the data on Azure, leveraging as much as possible no code or a low code approach. And today we are moving forward with our conversation, looking at ways to get the most out of your data, but also plugging in the data governance part. So once you end up with data sets within Azure, and those can be raw data sets, and then you refine and process these data sets in various ways, producing new data, so curated data sets, and all this data moves from stage to stage. How do you ensure visibility, first of all, over all these data sets? How do you manage the access to data sets? Who views what and who accesses what? So there are specific services and technology as part of Azure, which we will be exploring today, and in particular Azure Purview. And this is what we will do today, 11th of November. We have also extended our sessions to continue towards the end of November and then earlier of December, to go talk a little bit more and deep dive a little bit more inside infrastructural topics as well. So when you have to deploy these systems into productions, what are the various considerations that you need to put around scalability, networking, repeatability of putting together this infrastructure, and then also especially securing your infrastructure and visualizing the threats that can happen to your data and react on them on time. So it's a complete calendar of sessions designed week by week to cover each of these topics. Now, before we get started with the session of today, maybe if we can move to the next slide. Oh, by the way, below this calendar, you can see a link. At that link, you can register for the upcoming sessions. And then also next week, at that link, you will be able to see the recording for all the previous sessions in case you were not able to attend them. All right, now, just a little bit of a word around this, because it's something we care a lot. So at Microsoft, we see sustainability and humanity response to climate change as one of the greatest challenges of our lifetime. And we believe it is not too late to plan for a cleaner and greener future. And so as part of our commitment to sustainability, Microsoft Singapore will be planting a tree for every person attending this event. We can move to the next slide to discuss a little bit of the housekeeping rules. So as I mentioned just now, this session is being recorded, and because it will be available on demand afterwards to that link that was in the calendar slide. And yes, you can ask any questions, and you are most welcome, to have an interactive session with us. In the interest of everybody, you are muted. However, you should see a Q&A panel through which you can post the questions. You can do that throughout all the session. And at the end of this event, we will leave about 10 minutes of time for Q&A to elaborate on maybe on some of the key questions that we cannot easily reply by chatting, right? All right, so if we move to the next slide, let me introduce you the speaker of today, Alvin Tai, Senior Cloud Solution Architect specializing on data and AI, a team member of Microsoft Singapore. And I am Andrea. I am a Cloud Solution Architect as well in the same team as Alvin, and I will be moderating your questions today. So thanks a lot, Alvin, for being here with us today and for helping us to understand a little bit more of this complex topic, which is data governance. Over to you.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Andrea. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, everyone. All right, my name is Alvin. Yeah, so today I will be covering a topic which is quite close to a lot of people's heart, right? Which is data governance. So now it's very common terminology today, right? Everyone is talking about, the data is the new oil. Data is the most strategic asset to every organization. And in fact, research actually also shows that research from Gartner and from IDC also shows that today we are not only experiencing data explosion, right? But we also, reach to a point where we have so much data. We have tried to find answers in the data, and now it comes to a point is how do we actually govern all this data, right? Lying around in your organization. So now the data governance conversation is becoming increasingly important, right? Because a lot of customers like yourself or even partners, dealing with your customers, right? First thing first, a lot of customers has a lot of question is, how do I discover where are the data sets, right? What do I have in my organization, and how is all this data generated, and how can I trust it? And then on the other hand, you have compliance, right? Some of the industry is highly regulated, right? You need to actually ensure that you actually comply to all these regulations, and of course from a security standpoint, you tend to ask the question, what is my exposure? Is my usage of the data compliant? Especially for those of you, that actually involve handling of personal data. As well as especially when you are handling data coming from Europe, right? All these so-called sensitive data or personal data, right? When you are actually processing it or using it, right? You need to ensure that you are compliant. And then how do I control access and use it? And then and how do I actually keep track? Let's say, for example, today, certain region have new compliance in terms of handling personal data. How do I actually build all this compliance into the solution, into your data estates, and then to ensure that we continue to be compliant. So the element of success in data governance, right? The so-called the evidence, right, is that you will start to see that you manage to grow your data landscape, right? It's easy for you to actually introduce data assets into your environment, and yet you still can actually keep yourself, highly compliant, right? In those points that I mentioned just now, and you actually overcome. You are able to overcome operational silos, right? Because later on, when I talk about these solutions, you can see how we can achieve that, and you start to see, data usage increase in terms of agility, and then of course you also can keep up, right, and comply with the industry regulations, right? Come after you. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, today, please allow me to introduce you to this Azure services called Azure Purview, right? And from here, Azure Purview enables unified data governance in 4 main points over here, which I will elaborate in the upcoming slides. Right. So first thing first is reimagining yourself, the data governance in the cloud. All right. So it's a cloud native service, right? And then it set the foundation for effective governance, because this is a one-stop shop where you actually place or you can actually configure, right, all your data governance needs, right, in a single place, and maximize business value for data consumers. And then, of course, we actually has capability, right, inside Purview to allow you to gain strategic insight into your data usage across the estate. So how do we do that? First of all, Purview actually is it manage and govern operational and transactional and analytical data. So which means that anything, right, be whether it can be in on-premise. It also can be in a competitive, friendly competitive cloud. And of course, Azure is given that we can actually manage all these data assets. As mentioned, right, it's cloud native, right, it's purpose built, and it actually is to primarily address discovery and compliance of your needs. And it's fully managed and serverless, and it's a PaaS service. And also it actually eliminate all the manual, ad hoc, and homegrown solutions. Because sometimes when you are actually building data governance, I do see the data governance solution itself, right, is a piecemeal that actually piece a lot of things coming together, and end up you spend a lot of time integrating them together. Now, in terms of the second point, all right, the Purview actually give you the capability, right, to automate and discovery of data in on-premise as well as multi-cloud and SaaS sources. Right. So over time, we will build more connectors, right, to actually allow you allowing you to connect to more data assets. You can actually configure and classify your data at scale to specify sensitivity and compliance, right, based on some industry best practices as well as standards that we actually inbuilt into the product. And then from the lineage capability, you will know where the data comes from and how you actually transform your data, right, moving forward. Now, with this, how do you actually maximize business value using Purview? Is that we actually connect business and technical data analysts together by allowing you specifying business glossary, right? So that business users can go to Purview as a single place to actually query where are all the data assets pertaining to a single business, so-called business terminology that they are more interested in, right? Because usually a lot of cases where business users are familiar, right, with business description entities rather than the technical terminology that is being used by IT. Okay, and enable users to quickly find data and view its lineage and sensitivity, because inside that later on I will do a demo that you can see that you can actually browse the entity as well as all the columns classification, right? And in Purview, everything is picked up automatically. Right, and you also deliver a curated and consistent glossary of business terms and definition, which I mentioned just now. Right, so Purview actually allows you to understand at a glance how data is being created and used across your data estates, right? Be whether on-premise or from other cloud and as well as in Azure, right? Sometimes we do have a situation whereby I do see some customers they start to adopt multi-cloud, right? So Purview is actually possible for you to do it in Purview as well. Visually access the state of data assets and scan business glossary and sensitive data. Right, so this is all these things I will be able to demonstrate it later to how it's being done. All right, so as of today, I must say that Purview is in kind of like a phase 1, right? That's all I can mention just right now. As of now, Purview just get GA recently. I think it's last month, right? So as of now, what you can actually experience from Azure Purview is the data catalog as well as the data mapping capability as of today. And later on, I also include a demo. How can you make use of the underlying API, right, to discover some of the sensitive columns, and then after you have discovered these sensitive columns, how can you actually mask those sensitive columns, and when you actually preview those data. So, like I mentioned in the previous slide, right, Azure Purview is positioned as a single data governance solution, right, be whether it's on premise, your data assets on premise, in the cloud, or even SaaS applications, right? And then of course on the other side, Azure Purview absolutely, all right, support all the Microsoft ecosystem, be whether SQL Server, Power BI, all the Azure SQL databases, be whether Azure SQL database or all the open source database, and as well as Microsoft 365. As you can see that today, all the GA capability is the data producer and consumer. All right, it's a single pane of view for you to see all these data points, and then the data cataloging capability, and then the data mapping. Data insights today is still in preview, right? Now, this is how a Purview data map looks like, all right, which I'll go into details, more details, how you can actually set it up. All right, so it's a graphic user interface, right? I can say that there's no code need to be written when you configure the data Purview, right? So this is how it looks like at the first landing page. You can actually set up all the different relationships between your entities or even your departments. And there's no hard and fast rule how you actually configure this. Basically, this is up to you to configure, right, to design all the hierarchy in terms of organization, mapping to the departments, and then how all the data estates actually lined up into a single department, or even you have a holding company, and then you goes down into all the different business units, and then within the business unit, you have your own different departments. Now, if let's say you do not actually know what are you going to expect, right? Because sometimes you have so many data estates, and even like, for example, I do come across customers whereby even customer data, right? You have so many different repository pertaining customer information. So if you set up the so-called glossary well, all right, using synonyms, all right, you can actually do a search based on customer information. And what will happen is that we will be able to bring up all the data estates, or the data tables, or the data estates that actually have customer data inside there. And then from there, you can actually see how the data comes from, where the data comes from, and what kind of ETL process is affected. And using all these so-called these data stacks in your transformation ETL processes. Right, so this is a screenshot of Azure Purview Data Insights. All right, so it actually gives you a bird's eye view of how many assets you have, how many data assets you have, and how the data is being used. And in terms of scanning, business glossary, all these things in a single view, right? You can quickly access all this information very quickly within Purview portal. Yeah, so for those customers who is actually heavily invested in Microsoft solutions, right? So it'll be good news for you. Azure Purview supports all Microsoft technology out of the box, right? Be whether all the operational and analytical databases, on-premise SQL Server, Microsoft Office 365, Azure, and Power Platform. Right, as I mentioned many times, right, we do support multi-cloud, hybrid, and SaaS solutions from the party. Right, so now, like I mentioned, so these are the so-called features and capability currently. Right, so we do have all these capability currently now in GA. Right, just bear in mind that the preview data insight is in preview. all right? And then the Microsoft Information Protection Sensitivity Label support is actually still in preview right now. I will be covering a lot on this labeling security because it actually requires our M365 portal. Basically, just quickly summary, what is this, right? So let's say, for example, today you need to label a particular role in the data sets that is highly confidential, public, or secret, right? You can actually make use of our label sensitivity capability, right, to labels all these all these data sets. Right, so one of our customers who has really started using Purview, right? So quoting a sentence from the head of technology, Andrew, from the Heathrow airport, right? So Purview not only addresses the governance needs of our ambitious data estate, but the latest discovery features and simple UI will empower our analysts community to search and quickly understand the data across Heathrow. The ability to easily discover assets and browse lineage will ensure we follow trusted data across the enterprise based on common data standards, driving us to be more data-driven and efficient. Right, so this is a testimonial from our customers. All right, so now please allow me to go to cover this network diagram, this so-called architecture diagram a little bit. This is quite a high-level one. Now, the thing is this, right? When in the course of my work, I do come across a requirement from customers whereby, because for me, I do cover public sector customers, right? You may come across requirement, or we say, for example, among you guys, among the audience, you are from public sector, you belong to government agencies, or even for some enterprise customers, right? You may fall in a situation whereby network security, adopting PaaS services in the cloud, right? A lot of customers have a misconception that, oh, all these PaaS services are accessible from the internet. Now, if you are into all this today, and you let's say you're familiar with Azure today, actually you know that it's not quite true, right? You can design so-called the network access path securely. Now, let's say, for example, today you want to use Azure Purview, and all this and Purview, you want to use Purview, right, to govern your data estates, be whether on Azure. It can be those data estates running on VM. Maybe you may be running an Oracle database on a VM, or any other databases on VM, and you have some on-premise data sources as well sitting in your corporate network, right? Be it whether SAP or Oracle database or SQL Server. And now the question is this, right? You want this to be able to access securely. Now the thing is this, right? Azure Purview, later on during the demo, you can see that we do have a portal for you to actually configure all these things. The thing is this, right? When you can actually access all this portal from the public internet, but some customers may have concern that I can in this case I can actually go to a public place, going to a cafe or internet cafe, and then start accessing Purview from untrusted source, right? Then I can actually view all this data. So now, if let's say this is your concern, what it can be done is that we can actually design, accessing up to Purview entirely going through a private network. So first of all, you have your virtual network set up, and you can actually set up all these private endpoints. Right, so you can have ingestion private endpoints, which is responsible to ingest. So when you connect to your data sources, all this metadata will be ingested to Purview via your ingested private network, and then your Purview portal private endpoint is responsible for you to enter the Purview portal using private endpoint rather than from the public internet. And then the private account is for you to be able to access all these the account securely. And of course, this whole Purview is protected by Azure Active Directory. So let's say, for example, if your administrator set up two-factor authentication, when you access the portal, you will have to go through all this authentication, including the two-factor authentication as well. Okay, and then sorry. Yeah, so another thing is that you can actually, if you are familiar with Data Factory, right? You know that you can actually deploy self-hosted integration runtime as a gateway inside your environment, be whether on premise or inside your VNet, right? To actually to talk to your data estates using private endpoint for all the PaaS services, as well as your on-premise data sources on premise. You go through the same method of self-hosted integration runtime, and all this data can be collected, to Azure Purview by just specifying an outbound port, right, to Azure Purview, right? So that in this case, the Azure Purview will not need to come into your network and collect all those metadata. All right, just nice. I'm actually on time. All right, so it's 2:25. So let me actually, please allow me to do the demo here. All right, so I have set up Azure Purview, right? So now you can see that this is a landing page. So like, for example, just now I mentioned, right, you can actually do a search, right? So it's actually using our Azure Search technology, and as long as a customer is concerned, right, I can actually search, all my data estates within where Purview is connected to, right? So you can actually see that I can do a quick search, and all these tables, right, show up. Now, before you can actually do all the search, right, there are things that you need to set up in the very beginning of Purview. Now, so this is the mapping that I've done for this demo, right? Yeah, it's very expensive demo, because you need to set up a lot of services. So yeah, so I can actually afford to set up this field only. So I have a few, I have two data lake here, and then I have some SQL Server. I have set up an Azure SQL Server here. And then I also have Azure SQL 2019, right? Sitting in a VM in another VNet, simulating an on-premise database, right? So you can actually see that I can also collect, I also can connect to an on-premise database, right? Now, so first of all, how do you actually connect, right? So you can actually come here and do registration. As you can see that there are a lot of connectors that we can support today as of phase 1, as of today. You can see that I can connect to AWS, all the S3 buckets. All these are the data sources that currently is available for Purview today, right? And of course, all these connectors will keep increasing, right? So these are the ones, right? Including Oracle, Local, Salesforce, right? Power BI, and of course SAP, right? And then Teradata. Right, so these are the ones that is currently made available, right? So today, when you deploy your Purview account, you can start connecting to all these data sources right now. And this list, right, is going to increase, right? We are going to continue, right, to build data connectors and actually put it inside Purview. Okay, so once you have done that, you will actually so we can actually do registration. Let's say, for example, I want to choose a Azure SQL database, all right, and then the name, the subscription, right? I can choose a subscription, and then the server name. What are the server, right? That you have inside your subscription, right? So I have a few, and then the endpoint, and then after that you just click to register, right? The so-called this database will be registered with Purview. Now, after which you have done the registration, I'm not going to do the scan now because it takes some time. What will happen is that you need to trigger a scan. Now, a lot of customers or my partners ask me, right? Oh, do I need to do manual mapping? Nothing of that sort, right? It's automatically so-called. You just need to perform a scan, and all these things will be picked up by the scan. So once you added the data estates, you will start to see a box will appear, right? Depending on where you actually put at the collection. All right, so I actually put it, let's for example, put it at a sales, it will appear in the sales collection, right? And you can see that in this box here, you can see this, this icon here, right? That's where you can trigger a scan. Okay. Now, so we can trigger a scan here and filling up all this, the name. Now, integration runtime. Now, look at this. This is integration runtime is something like how Purview actually connects to the data sources. So you can, by default, we have this Azure Auto Resolve integration runtime. If you're familiar with Azure Data Factory, right, it actually uses the same technology, right? So Azure Auto Resolve integration runtime means that we make use of the by default integration runtime to connect to all the data sources. So let's say, for example, I'm using right now auto resolve integration runtime to connect to my data lake here. So what happened is that Purview is going to connect to the data lake via our Azure backbone, right? It doesn't go out to the internet. Right? I just want to stress that, right? It doesn't go out to the internet. It actually uses the Azure backbone to reach your data storage. Now, remember just now I have the network diagram over there. Today, if let's say, for example, you lock down your storage, right? You do not allow public access or access to your storage via public endpoint. You want everything to be private, then you can actually make use of integration, self-hosted integration runtime, right, to connect to it. Okay. Now, so after that, when you actually so-called trigger a scan, and then let's say, for example, I say continue. I'm not sure what will happen. Okay. Now, so you can actually specify. You can actually allow. You can actually specify which are the folders you want to the scan to take place. So you can actually specify which folders. Right. Of course, by default, you want everything to be scanned. And once you say continue, all right, system default, the scan rules, right? I will talk about scan rule later. You can also customize your scan rule as well. All right, so continue, and you can schedule on the scan recurring, right? Because what happened is that data estates they do have data keep coming in, right, into the storage or into the database. You actually want the scan to recur, every month or every week depending on your needs. All right, to actually get in those delta into Purview, or if let's say it's just a one-time manual scan that you want to do, like for example this demo, you can actually schedule a one-time scan. Once it's scanned, right, then all this metadata will be collected and inside Purview, all right, and then you can start looking at it. Okay, move along, right? So when you do scan, sometimes you want to set up your own scan rule, right? Because due to whatever reason, this particular storage, you just only scan, certain format of files, or you want to actually scan only a few tables. So that's where you can actually specify a scan rule. You can build a scan rule. Okay. And then what will happen is that, so these are the different files that we can actually support out of the box. All right, and you can actually untick. So let's say, for example, you only want to spec for this particular scan rule, you just want to, you are interested in only a certain file format, you can untick all this format, and you can even specify a new custom files format, right? Let's say, for example, you have a special file format, especially in the manufacturing or the machinery industry, you have a very special binary files, right? That's where you can actually specify your own file type, right, that you want to scan. And then after that, you say continue, and then that's where you will specify the system rules, right? So these are the by default system rules that is inbuilt, right? So we can actually specify all these system rules, inside the scan rules, right? Basically, all these are classification rules that I will talk about it later on. All right. So this is how you actually so-called create a scan, a custom scan. Otherwise, by default, right, all these are the default scan rules that we have built for you. You can actually use it out of the box. Integration runtime. So like I mentioned just now, oops. Okay, I need to check my VM what happened. Right, so what happened is that if you have on-premise data sources, or you want to scan your data sources in Azure, everything is using private endpoint. Right, so you may need a self-hosted integration runtime setup. Right, so setup is very easy. So you can actually create new, and select self-hosted, say continue, and then create. Now, once you create it, right, you will see there's a key generated for you, and that's when you need to pass this key at the self-hosted integration runtime VM sitting either on-premise or in Azure inside VM. And then after that, once they do a handshake, right, that's when this self-hosted integration runtime will be connected to this particular instance of your Purview. All right, because what happened is that again, right, during my course of my work, a lot of customers ask me, oh, this will this self-hosted integration runtime connect to other customers, Purview or Data Factory? No, right? So this instance, the handshake is via the key that you supply just now. You can see, yeah, this is how the self-hosted integration runtime talk to a particular instance of the Purview, right? Belong to you. Now the next one is classification. So we actually have created a lot of classification out of the box, all right, for you. All right, so like for example, in Singapore, we have the Singapore NRIC, all right, classification rules that is come default in Purview. All right, of course, you can actually do custom. Okay, you can actually create your own custom classification rule. Right, so you can actually, first of all, you need to specify your own, all right, and then after which you create a name. Then you specify the classification rule, right? So you can, so this is let's say for example class 1, right? Just now I said demo, right? Yeah. So link to it, and of course with this classification rule, right? You can actually use regular expressions, or you can, if you have dictionary already, you already have dictionary setup, right? You can actually upload the file that you have all the rules inside your dictionary file, and you can just upload it into this classification rule, all right? And then when when you trigger a Purview scan, right? That's when we'll pick up, all these classification rules based on the setup that you have done, right? And then start to classify those columns that coming into Purview. Now, the other one that I want to kind of like highlight is that so far, Purview is able to scan the data sets and pick up all the columns that have all these so-called data patterns or data signatures that belong to a certain data classification. Now, one of the questions that comes to me, which is very valid, is that what happens if, let's say, those column that is encrypted, right? So if let's say the column is encrypted, right, using some form of application encryption, then Purview will not be able to pick it up. All right, then as far as all these so-called scenarios concerned, you will have to classify it manually later on, which I'm going to show you how. All right, now the next thing is that okay, so we are now back to the landing page, right? So I show you the search, okay, and before I go into the attributes, the data sets, right? Let me go into glossary. So you build your glossary using this management panel, right? So first of all, you can create a new glossary if you want to, right? By creating a new term, right? Be it whether a system default or a demo one. Okay, so you can actually create a new template, all right? And then you can essentially set the attribute. So like for example, the template name. Now in the template name, the attribute can be you can actually set it that must mark as required, so it become a mandatory field, all right? And the field type, so it can be a text, a freeform text that you can actually write description of the particular glossary items, all right? Single choice. So let's say, for example, you want to mandate that you want to allow a single choice, all right? Multiple choice, and that is a date field. Okay, so these are the 4 field types that you can actually specify when you create a new attribute. Okay, so once you have done that, right, you can also import, if let's say you have the glossary already pre-built, you can actually import them as well. You can actually use the so-called the system default or again a custom glossary terms that you have built up, right? And yeah, so a lot of question is this, right? When I talk about these glossary terms, let's say for example, I want to build my glossary terms on a file first, right? By allowing business users to contribute right into the glossary terms building. You can actually download a sample CSV file from here, right? So that we actually define. So with this sample CSV file, we will tell you the format that you want to follow, so that you will be able to build all these glossary terms, outside of Purview. And then after that, you can actually do import, mass import into Purview, right? This is also possible. So this is how you can actually acquire, right, the sample templates right, for you to build your glossary. All right, and now we can see that this is a list view and hierarchy, right? So in over here in the glossary terms, you can actually build hierarchy. So let me switch it to the hierarchy view, right? So like for example, I have a hierarchy of workplace analytics, right? So these are the the following glossary terms, right, that belong to workplace analytics. So you may have another glossary terms for finance, for HR, for operations, for supply chain, and so on and on and on, right? So you can actually build hierarchy in Purview for the glossary terms. Okay. Now, so the next thing is this, right? So now when I actually browse the assets, right? So you can actually browse the assets by, by business unit, by department, depending on how you build your collections. And so let's say, for example, I click on sales, all right? So in the sales department, these are the databases that I have, all right? These are the blob storage or the data lake files that belong to the sales department. Okay. Now let's say, for example, I'm going to the customer table, all right? So you can see that after the scan, right, Purview is able to pick up, right, the email address, the person name, as well as the US phone number as the classified column, right? It will be picked up automatically during the scan. Now in the property, right, you can see all these are the properties, right, belonging to these tables, the schema, all right? So I can actually have I have a sensitivity label set up here, all right? And then these are the classification that is classified for these particular columns, all right? And the lineage, there's no lineage here yet. The contact, right? So you can actually set the contact, right? So who is the expert and who is the owner of these data sets, and then the related pane will tells you that what are the tables that kind of relate to this sales table, these tables. Now, when I did an edit, when I click on the edit, right, that's where you can actually even further manually, enhance or enrich, the information pertaining to these particular tables. So of course, you can actually select the classification of these particular tables and then the glossary terms. Okay, and then when it comes to the schema, when I edit it, so let's say for example, the scan are not able to pick up a particular column, right? So that's where you need to you can actually come in here and set the classification manually by specifying the classification level, column level at this pane over here. And of course, you can also specify the glossary term as well. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is okay. Now, if let's say today, if you are using Data Factory for your data transformation as well as your data orchestration tool, today you can actually connect Data Factory. This is over here, right? You can actually connect your Data Factory over here. Once it's connected, right, it would be able to pick up, right, all the transformation logic that is being specified in Data Factory. So I do have one lineage for you to show you guys. So let me see, that is storage. Okay, I have a file set up. Okay, so when I open this file, all right, so while it's actually it's very similar to what I've shown you just now for the SQL database. Now, if I go to the lineage, you can see that now this file, you can see the lineage over here because there is a transformation going on, that's involved using these files, right? Now, the very common question that are being asked to me from my customers or from the partner is that do I need to set it up or do I need to map this manually, right? The answer is no, right? After you connect your data factory with all the data sources by registering them to Purview, and then after the scan is done, all these things is picked up automatically, right? You do not need to actually do any manual intervention. You just need to register the data sources, connect to your data factory, and then perform a scan. And all these things will be picked up automatically. So this is how it looks like. All right, so this is a very simple one, right? Of course, usually in real world, the transformation, the ETL process or ELT process can be even more complex than that. Okay, so this is the copy process from data factory. All right, and is copy and transform from a storage to another storage. Now, let's say, for example, I'm interested that, okay, which are the files that actually have a date attributes, right? So when I click on the date, so I can see that, oh, actually, these are the places where it had this attribute, and then I can actually further, highlight all the attributes, and then it will show up, right? That where are the data source, where are the tables of files, right, that have all these attributes. Now this little switch here, I can't. Okay, so I must say that this switch here will not be very effective on this demo here. So let's say, for example, you have a very long ETL process or ELT process, right? By switching this, when you switch this, what will happen is that Purview will be able to highlight, right, those tables or files that has all these attributes within your ETL process, right? But of course, this one you can't see, right, because it's a fairly simple one. Okay, so you can't see it, but it's very useful when you have a very complex ETL process, and this switch, become very useful to you. All right. Okay, so this is the lineage, and yep, that's it. I think it's about there on all about Purview. All right, so this is the preview feature, right? So from here you can have a bird's eye view of the assets inside. All right, so from here I know that I have 8 sources. I have the number of assets is 195. Classified assets is 41, and so on and so on, right? So this pane gives you a quick insight of your assets. And then from here, you will know that what kind of asset you have, right? I have SQL Server, Azure Files, Blog, and so on and so on. Yeah, and then the top 5 extension, you know that actually I have a lot of CSV, right, in my assets, all right, and scan, right? So if you want to know, how many scan and then how is it succeeded, whether it's failed, right? So all these are the how many scans you perform, right? So it's give you a quick summary of that. The glossary view. All right, so yeah, so you see that the total is total terms, right? Then how many is approved? Yeah, because in the glossary terms, we actually do have a workflow, right, for you to specify, to approve, right, from high authority. Classification, right? So again, it's a summary page on all the classified attributes, right? How many of them, and how many files are classified, and so on. Right? So this is a quick summary. Okay, so with 2 minutes, let me quickly go to another one. Now, with all this information, right? So you can see that now you have a catalog that is being built up. Right? So how can you actually make use of all this information that you have built in Purview? One of the way is to actually access the underlying Atlas API that is come with Purview. So from here, I actually make use of Synapse, right? The Spark pool, right? The Spark engine here, whereby we have actually some Spark codes here. Thanks for the originator. And also Marcus T, right? My colleagues will help me to troubleshoot a little bit before we get this thing working. So in summary, right? Just to summarize this in 2 minutes, what happened is that this Spark code here basically is to access the underlying API of Purview and pull out those attributes, the tables and files, and then from the iteration of the data estates, we actually find out which are the fields that actually has a classification being set on the column. So, like, for example, these are the result set that we can see, right? So you can see that this is a bit small. Let me So from here, you can see that so you can see that this particular file here, right? You can see that the return, the country actually is classified under the country classification rules, right? So it's Microsoft something, right? So it's classified under the country Microsoft government country classification rule, right? So if I go back to Purview under the classification, right? So it's under the Microsoft government country name. Okay, so in essence, right, how can you actually make use of this API at this moment is that you can actually find out, you can actually get from the API those columns that is being classified, and you can make use of so once you have this rule being pulled out all this metadata, once you have all this metadata, what you can do is that let's say for example, when you want to explore your data using Databricks, for example, or even Synapse Azure Pool, or even using Hadoop Spark engine, you can actually when you build the data frame, you can actually include some masking algorithm into those columns by collecting all this metadata, or you can actually make use of our open source solution called Presider, right, to actually help you to kind of like mask the data. Okay, so this is how you can make use of the information from Purview. After you have built all this all this wonderful data inside Purview. All right, so with this, my time is up. Right, now we are open for questions.
Thank you, Arvin. Thanks a lot for taking the time to explain and demo all the capabilities that Purview brings today. And while you were talking, there were a few questions. Some of them we have already answered in the chat, but let me quickly repeat them, and then there's some new ones as well. So. Well, there was an initial questions whether when you set up the self-hosted IR instance, whether it was possible to also reuse maybe an existing self-hosted IR setup for ADF to allow Purview to connect it. Yeah. So so yes, yeah. No. So today. The integration runtime for Purview cannot be shared with the Synapse or ADF, right? Yeah. There was another one on if today a customer is already using Atlas, can the customer migrate basically to Purview in a seamless fashion, since Purview is compatible with the Atlas API?
Okay, very good question. The answer is no. You can't actually. There's no capability to actually export out all those metadata and then import into Purview as of today. In the future, I'm not sure, but as of now, I can tell you that it's not possible. You have to rebuild everything inside Purview, unfortunately.
Yes. So we replied earlier to the same question, basically stating the same, and so that you can use. Yeah, you have to basically scan again your data sources first, and then basically once you have the assets then available within the Purview account, then eventually you can use you can maybe try to use the Atlas-like APIs to maybe update the metadata, and also maybe to push the some lineage information eventually. Which brings me to the new question that we have had just now. And so basically for data lineage, is it only able to detect it from Azure Data Factory the way that you demonstrated it earlier? Or if there are Spark jobs running in HD Insight or Databricks, would the Purview being able to detect the lineage from those jobs?
Okay, again, a very, very good question. As of now, I must say that we only support Data Factory at the moment. And as you can see that Databricks is not a supported data source yet, right? Of course, Databricks is in the roadmap, right, as a data source. In the future, I must say that we will be able to detect lineage from even more tools, like for example, maybe Spark. You know, I know that Informatical is in the roadmap as well, or even Talent.
Right. There was a question also that we answered earlier on in the chat where whether Purview encrypts sensitive data that is coming from SQL tables. But basically, Purview, we replied that Purview basically only stores and manages the metadata of the data sources.
Correct. Correct. As you can see, as you can see from the demo, right, ladies and gentlemen, as of now, you can see that Purview do not review data. All right. So like Andrea has rightly mentioned, as of now, what we collect is just the metadata and the schema of the data sets. Right. We do not collect any data. Hence, there's no capability for us to preview the data as of now. Now, just now I mentioned about encryption, right? I do see, you know, some cases where if let's say the table is encrypted using, like, for example, like in SQL Server, if you use a symmetry key, right? Then what will happen is that Purview may not be able to pick up, all right, all these tables, right? It will not able to classify the table for you automatically after the scan, right? So this is something that you need to watch out for.
All right, let us see. Let's give a few moments to see whether. Yep. Okay. A new question has just come up. Publish it. Is there any performance implications running a scan on production databases?
As of now, we do not see any. We do not see any issue. But of course, this is a very valid question as well. You know, if let's say the production system is already very busy, right? And you say, for example, the CPU is high. Yeah, when you do a scan at a point of time, yeah, definitely, you know, it will add the stress, right, to the production systems. Yeah, so it's best that when you can perform the scan, you know, during loud period if you can. But usually it doesn't take a lot of resources from the source systems, because we are just collecting the metadata most of the time. Because what happens is that after the scan, right, the classification, all this classification identification is done using the Purview infrastructure and not on the source systems. I hope I answered this question.
Yeah, I think yes, that was a good question. Thanks for clarifying that. Just a couple of minutes going. So a couple of questions. I'll select one. How do we use Purview to manage access control from a governance perspective?
Okay, so as of now, what we have here is that okay, access control. I need some clarification. You're talking about looking at those attributes inside here.
So there are no details on this question, but I guess it may be related maybe to one of the slides you were presenting earlier, where basically you were talking about yeah, how do you maintain a view on who has basically trusted access to the data, I guess. Maybe in the interest of time, since we have kind of reached out, our time limits, unfortunately. I would maybe I would encourage the person that has asked this question to contact our team afterwards, and we will be able to jump on a call and clarify fully and understand a little bit more details on what is the scenario.
Yeah.
And Alvin, maybe I'll just ask your help to project a couple of slides that you had in your deck at the end. One is again a reminder about the calendar and the upcoming sessions. So you can see the link down below where to register for the next few sessions. This recording and the previous sessions again will be available next week at the same link. Next one in particular, it will be about leveraging Terraform to set up landing zones and basically repeatable deployment patterns for your big data architectures. And other type of architectures as well. And then the last slide, the next one, I would like to so maybe one more. There's a survey that you can fill, and there's a QR code that here it is. And we would love to hear your feedback. So what are the topics of your interest? Any further questions that you may have, so that we can tune these sessions to your interest and to your particular scenarios. And with this, I wish a good afternoon and a good evening to everyone. I'll see you at the next session. Thank you, Alvin, again for being with us today and driving us through.
Thank you.